In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening. We're so glad to have you with us this evening on our program. We are so pleased to welcome Dana Carrozza to our program. She's going to talk to us tonight about sacred selections. And Dana, thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to spend some time talking with our viewers about the work that you do.
Well, thank you, Isla, so much for asking me to come and share on such a really wonderful, important, and useful tool for young women everywhere.
Well, we'll just can't wait to hear what you can tell us, or will tell us all about the program and the work that you're doing and the results and any way that also the ways that we can help. Obviously, I've sort of passed the years of adopting children, but I hope that there will be things that I can do as well.
Oh, yes, there's something for everyone. And just so you know, our oldest adoptive parents that are Sacred Selections parents are in their 70s. So it's never too old. Mm-hmm. They adopted a granddaughter who was at risk of going to foster care.
Wow.
So, yeah, love them, don't you?
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really great.
Yes.
Well, we will give you the floor and be looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us.
Thank you, Ala. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. I set up my set in my living room. You're all in that. I hope everybody has a pumpkin latte or something good to cuddle up with. And let's talk about something that is so near and dear to my heart and near and dear to God's heart, and that's adoption. People always say, did you adopt yourself? No. Are you a social worker? No, actually, my degree is in business and in art. And then everybody goes, well, why are you doing this? So let's start at the very beginning. And we're going to start back in the 1950s. Yeah, we're going to go way back. My mother and father were married, and their first baby, my sister, at 7 months, my mom went into a coma and went blind. She had toxemia and didn't know it. And the baby was lost. And my mother lived through it. And of course, she was devastated. And then a couple of years later, she got pregnant with my brother and everything was fine. Then a couple of years later, she got pregnant with me. And the doctor said, Carrie, it's happening all over again. And your baby's going to die this time, of course, but this time you're going to die. You're not going to be able to pull yourself through this like you did last time. And so this is 1952, and he told her, you must have an abortion. Now, my mother said, people knew what abortion was, but it certainly wasn't proclaimed everywhere, and people didn't talk about it. So they went home and prayed about it and went back to the office the next day. And my dad said to the doctor, he said, is there anything that you could do to help her not have this toxemia like she had experienced the first time? And he said, well, I was reading in one of the journals of medicine. Now, understand, I was born in a little bitty mining town in New Mexico called Silver City, and not the hub. It's not like here in Nashville with Vanderbilt and all. And it was cutting edge therapy. He said I would have to give her shots 3 times a day, and she would have to go to complete bed rest. And so my mom and dad decided They said, you do everything you can do to help her medically, and we're going to pray and do everything we can for God to save her life. I was born full term, 8 pounds, totally good. So I was blessed. And all my life, I had heard this story. So as a child growing up, you think, well, what am I supposed to do with my life? You know, if I lived, my sister didn't live. My mother risked her life. My father walked in faith. Um, what is it? So this was always going in the back of my mind. So I go on with my life, and I meet and marry my wonderful husband, who is medicine. I'm not. And we open up these chain of medical laboratories, like, you know, when the doctor says, go and get these tests done and go to the lab. Well, that's who we were, and that was our name, the lab. And of course, with my marketing background, I said, let's open up in shopping centers. Now, this was the early 90s when medicine was hidden. We did radio and TV commercials, marketing once again, and we just did things different. And one of the things we did was $10 pregnancy tests. This was way before EPT tests or any at-home tests were available. And we did them for $10, which was phenomenal because at that time, blood tests were like close to $100. So it was a loss leader, if you will, if in marketing terms, to get girls in, and knowing that if they were pregnant, we could do all of that work if they had a good experience with us. But we also knew the other flip of the coin when girls came in and they wanted written confirmation of their pregnancy test. I asked David, and he said, well, they're probably going to go for an abortion with that confirmation. And that it hurts me. And I'll never forget the first girl who came in. She worked at Intel. We were in Folsom, California, and Intel was high tech. And she had her little gray business suit. She needed that piece of paper for her procedure the next day. She had her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was 28 years old. It was 1992. I've tracked that baby, and now that baby would be 29 years old. And as she walked out the door with her ponytail swinging and happy that she was having her procedure, I just started crying. And I told David, we've got to do something. We have some power here, although limited power. We've got some connections. God's giving this to us. Let's pray about it. You know, what can it be? So as God would have it, there was one of my dear friends at church, who's one of the deacon's wives. She was told me that they'd had 3 biological boys. They really wanted to adopt. And I went, ooh, adoption, that might be a connection here. So we went on a journey together. That was Steve and Melody Dickey. And we found this wonderful adoption agency that was local. And I told her what I was trying to do. And she said, you know, I could do something for you to help you. And so she did these tracks that showed a pregnant girl looking out a window and very pregnant, saying adoption is another option. And so we started kind of going from there, and we put these tracks out on the counters of all of our medical labs. Now, you know, because of HIPAA, we couldn't talk to the girls about this, but this was our silent protest. And from there, girls would say, well, what does this mean? How can you help me? And so we started working with that. We started working with Christians who wanted to adopt and worked with this local agency. And I was on the board of that agency for several years, worked with the lawyers in town. I learned a lot about adoption during that time. And then I just had this epiphany, and I told David, I said, you know, the families that are calling, they want to adopt. They can take care of the baby. They just don't have that $10 to $20 to $30 to $40,000 for all these fees. We need to set up, separate from the church, a 501c3 where people could give their money, get their tax advantage, and all the money could go to help these babies. And so it was a great idea, but great ideas need a lot of work and a lot of prayer and a lot of money. And so we prayed about it. We got a board together. I wanted a 501c3, a nonprofit status set up by a very, very, very reputable law firm. I didn't want to do one of these $25 at Reno filings. And I was quoted anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000, which it might have well been $1 million. We were struggling with our business. We had 2 kids that were going to be going to college soon. A lot was hanging on. So as God would have it, one day one of our friends that we'd gone to school with, Kevin Finley, and his wife Pam, came and visited at church. Their daughter was dating one of the boys at church. And I said, did you get your law degree? And he said, yeah, I'm partner in the firm now. And I went, okay, we need to go to have lunch. So we went to lunch together. And while we were at lunch, we were catching up. And then I asked him, what kind of law do you do? And he said, well, I personally set up nonprofits. And I'm kicking David under the table. And he goes, this guy's a dead man. He has no idea. And so I explained to Kevin and Pam our idea of sacred selections. And I said, but we need help. And he said, oh, I'll set up your nonprofit status. No problem. And I said, okay, how much? And he said, oh, Dana, for you, we'll do it for free. My firm will do pro bono. And to this day, and that was way back in 2004. Do you hear that voice in the background? That's not my conscience. That's David. 2004, he set it all up for us. We had a board together ready to go, but then we needed the money, right? So as God would have it, LabCorp, which is now actually the largest lab in the world, came into town and they said, we want to buy you out. And David said, here's the keys. And I said, where's the money? We need it for the babies. And immediately started in 2006. And the first year we did one. And at that time, we were quoted $30,000 to $35,000, $40,000 for an adoption. And David and I said, wow, wouldn't it be great if in our lifetime we could do 5? And then God slapped me in the face, like he does a lot, and said, watch this. So here's a picture of, if those of you who don't know Sacred Selections and would like to get on our mailing list, please let me know. Send a comment, because this is our first 300, but guess what? We're on 395. We're working on the 400 card, and these little tiny dots are all the faces of the first 300, and we've got the next 100 ready to go. 400. Yeah, if you would have told us that in 2006, I would have first said, how? And as much as I had faith in what God was going to do for us, there was just the logistics. How does this work? What does this mean? So God kept us going and kept us alive. And he taught us little by little until we were doing 4 a year, 5 a year, 10, 20, 30, 40. And at our height was 57 in 1 year. Yeah, do the math for that. That's 1 point something every week. So, and those are just the completed adoptions. There are other adoptions that you work on, but there's a disruption or the girl disappears and, those things. So there's a lot of work. Now we set up Sacred Selections to be in our home. Office has always been basically our kitchen table till we moved to Tennessee here. And there's really an office now. And my private cell phone here. Yeah, my private cell phone is the company phone. We try and keep everything on the cheap, but it's also funny because I like to tell this story. Now, this is when we were in California, so there was a 3-hour time difference. We were always playing that. And this lady called me at 4 o'clock in the morning, California time. She was 7 o'clock. And I said, hello. And she said, oh, I didn't think your switchboard would be open this early. And I said, well, on the switchboard, we're here. I'm in bed. What is it? Because babies come at all hours of the day and night. And so God just keeps blessing us. When you go to a fundraiser or if you send us a donation, if you can tell us how you want it to go. But at the fundraisers, 100% of that money that night will go to the foundation. We have wonderful corporate sponsors. And if you have a business that you would like to be a corporate sponsor for Sacred Selections, please let us know. And the corporate sponsors help pay for our accountants and bookkeepers and all the many people that we've had to bring on who all work virtually to help us, still at a limited capacity. But these are the things, these are the reasons that people work so hard. It's because of these babies. You know, what are we going to do? What would we do without these 300 children? When we hit 300, I looked at David and I said, and remind me again, how many were in Gideon's army? It was 300. And what did God do with that 300 number? He had cut it in half and in half. And he told Gideon, okay, now you're ready to go at 300. So we all understand the times that are going today. And I don't know what these children are going to do in God's kingdom specifically, but I do know that they're going to be a force to reckon with. And I do know that we wrestle with the devil every day for every one of these children, because these children are going to be powerful warriors against them. Because not only will they be raised in a Christian home, but they will understand this spirit of adoption that I'm afraid got lost in all the morass of all of the debating in the 50s and 60s about orphans' homes. And we're not in that fight. We're the fight to help the children. This should be something that we all are doing every day to help the children of the world. Now, of these 395, they come from 9 countries around America, 9 countries around the world and America. And they're from birth to age 18. Of our 395, now 43 have been baptized and brought Christ into their lives. You know, the older children understand adoption, because when they come into a home and they're taught the plan of salvation, they get it. They go, well, that was me. You redeemed me from Ukraine, from China, from all of the countries that we've helped. Or they've been redeemed from foster care, or redeemed from a situation that was very scary. Let's put it that way. And I want to be redeemed by God too. I want to be adopted by God. And we are all adopted. I hope all of you have heard the beautiful song, Abba Father, that C.E. Charlie Couchman wrote about adoption. You know, I contacted her about 6 years ago, and Charlie is a Sacred Selections grandmother times 2. And I said, Charlie, did you know that in no songbook that I'm acquainted with is there any song that talks about us being adopted by God? And she said, oh, surely not. And I went, well, look, you know, I want to find that song. And we couldn't find anything. So she has written this beautiful song. And if you want to get in touch with me, I can send you to the link. Symphonia just recorded it this summer. And it's a beautiful song, Abba Father. And it talks about I am adopted, loved, and chosen. I am his, and he is mine. And this is something powerful that I think all Christians need to be reminded. We're adopted. We understand that concept. We should understand the concept to help these children. Now, along with this, yes, the children are being helped. Along with this, we're able to share the gospel with many of the birth mothers that we work with. So much so that now 5 birth mothers have been baptized. 5. 4 have come back to the Lord. 2 birth fathers have been baptized, and 2 sets of grandparents are now going to church. Because, you know, God's light shines the brightest in a really dark space, doesn't it? And nothing's darker than adoption at the beginning, because it's sad. You've got a girl that's been abandoned, usually abused. You've got a baby coming that's not wanted. The world tells her to abort this baby. But it's very interesting, because as much as the world tells these girls to abort, One year I looked at all of our situations in a year and I said, did you know that 10% of these children, the girls were going to go have an abortion when they stopped and said, my body's been violated once, so I'm not going to do it again. So it's the flip of what the world tells us, isn't it? And now these beautiful babies live, and now they're in the homes of Christian families, and they will know their story, that they were adopted out of love and God's care. And we sow every day, and it's not just once a day. I was just telling Isla before we started, if my eyes are all puppy, I've been crying most of the afternoon because I was on the phone with a birth mother who has had a very sad life. And most of these girls have had sad lives. They haven't had a dad in their life. They haven't had a good sense of family, and certainly not God's love. And she was having a rough time, and she was making some poor decisions. And she was doing some things that weren't healthy to her or her baby. And I just said, can we pray together? And she said, yes, yes, yes. So we had a nice long prayer together. But at the end, you know what she asked me? Can I pray and confess to God? I said, yeah. She said, can I do it in front of you? I said, yes. And she led the most beautiful prayer over the phone. And she asked God to forgive her for her attitude that she'd had that day to the family that she had chosen to adopt her baby. And they had had some words, and basically she'd cussed out the adoptive mother. And she saw in that moment that was not the appropriate thing. And she asked God to forgive her. And then when she said amen, she said, did I do it right? And of course, I'm bawling. And about that time, David walks in and he's listening to this. And it was so powerful. It was so moving to be able to show God in real time to a girl who's hurting. And she said, I was just making bad decisions. I said, I know. I said, but God's forgiven you. Now let's move forward and let's start making some better decisions. So I'll tell you, my 93-year-old mother, blessed mother, God's kept her alive for a long time. And I think that, my father, we lost a few years ago, but every time I would go see him, he'd always raise his hand and go, what's our number? What's our number? They were the first ones to give any money to Sacred Selections. They so believed in it. And I'm so glad that my mother now lives with us because she can see it in real time and overhear the conversations. And she just says, I had no idea. And I always remind her it's because of her choice to keep me alive, to risk her life. It's why I serve now. And I feel that we all can serve in many ways. Certainly there are people who write big checks to us, and we enjoy those and we appreciate those so much. But I really like the children who, like, these beautiful earrings were made for a sale up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and the girls made me some too, special for me. And the young girls bake cookies, build birdhouses, make pillows, do aprons, do all of these things. The young boys in Lexington, Kentucky were making these beautiful trays that you put on top of your cooktop to use as counter space. They were doing lawn mowing. It was just so wonderful to see these young kids come up. But what's really powerful is to see our Sacred Selections children come to the events and hear the stories, and they want to tell their story. And that's what's going to keep Sacred Selections going way, way, way beyond us. And that's why we moved to Tennessee, was to be able to set up a foundation that could pay people to do what we're doing for free. We're not asking for the money, but we want to I'm 68, not going to last forever. And I don't want Sacred Selections to die with me. So we're trying to get that together. We're trying to get people who can help us and row it and work in it and be a part of it. And we're very excited that God's going to open up those doors for us. He has done so many, many, many times for us. I'd like to tell you a quick story about why we think God is blessing us through his people and how he does that. I know you probably have heard of all of the adoptions we do in Arizona, and everybody thinks that's where all the babies come from, but they don't. They come from all over the world. But there are now 12 agencies that we work with in Arizona because they've heard the reputation of Sacred Selections families. And what's fun is that the social workers all work for multiple agencies. And when there's a difficult situation, the social worker will say, have you called Sacred Selections? Have you called Dana? Do you know her? Do you know how great her families are? So we have the reputation not only in Arizona, but we're building it through across America. I just got an email right before this started from an agency in Florida saying, Dana, we need one of your great Sacred Selections families for a situation. You know why they say that? Because they know that our families are home study approved. They've gone through our very tight screening of, making sure they have references, they're good. When I take on a family, I say, okay, you're going to be my child and I'm your adoptive mom. And they kind of smile. And I go, no, that means I can spank you when you need it. And sometimes the families need spanking. And I'm not afraid to do that because we're all going towards the goal of a child. But sometimes our emotions get tied up. There are hospitals in America that are non-adoption hospitals because guns have been drawn, knives have been drawn, there's been fights. It's highly volatile, but they know when they call in a Sacred Selections family that there won't be. That's not going to happen. They'll act like Christians. They'll behave like Christians. Oh, and they're fully funded, so they'll get their check right away within 24 hours. So it's all of those things that God has put together and in the hearts of the families. And when the families, new ones, get ready to go to Arizona or anything, I always go, listen, that door's been opened by a bunch of wonderful Christians. Don't you close it. Don't you be the reason. And now I'm hearing from our families that when they walk into the NICU, that the nurses are saying, please tell us you're a Sacred Selections family. And they'll go, yeah, why? And they go, because we love the Sacred Selections families. They just go about their business. They're great with the babies. They do what we tell them. You guys are golden. And from that, someone wrote to me the other day that the nurses, when you're in the NICU environment, you get very bonded. And when they know they're a Sacred Selections family, they'll come to them and say, will you pray for me because of this, this, and this? And one of the mothers said, but you can do that. No, I want you to. So they've started like online Bible classes with them. Okay, who knew that, right? Who knew that we would reach the doctors, the nurses, the lawyers, the social workers to where they want to know more. They want to know more. One of the social workers told me, I always love that I've got at least one of the Sacred Selections families in a group of profiles that I'm showing to a birth mother, because I know that that child that goes to that family is going to know God. And she goes, I don't really push it, but I always go, well, just look at them. They're pretty nice. And it's a wonderful thing God has blessed us with. This network, it just keeps growing and growing. And our reputation as adopting the child that nobody wants. Did you know that children are abandoned, literally abandoned in the NICU at the hospital? Like the family will walk away. And we'll get those calls. And the calls are, you've got to have a family here before 8 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning. And people always say, well, why the rush? Well, the rush is because if you don't have someone there ready who's going to parent that child goes to the state. And we don't want that, do we? We never want a child to be raised by the government. So I'm going to tell you a story that kind of typifies how wonderful our families are. And this is a family who had raised 3 children, and they decided that they wanted another one. It's what we call the round 2 crew. And they had a little girl, and they said, well, we think that she needs a brother or a sister. So they had gone and decided to adopt, and they were chosen right away. And when the baby was born, everything was great. But then the attorney called me and she said, Dana, it's bad. It's really bad. And I said, what? And she said, uh, well, the mother has just gone crazy. Remember those hormones you have after you have your baby and then put into that drugs? Yeah, it's a lethal combination. And she was acting so badly that they put her in psychiatric lockdown. Now, what psychiatric lockdown means is that she's going to be there until she can be deemed fit enough to sign legal papers. Um, could be a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year. We don't know. So, in the meantime, the state would take that baby in the meantime. And once the state takes the baby, it's a hard road to get that baby back. So, the next morning, I got a call from the attorney, and she said, did you hear what your family did last night? And I was like, oh, not what you want to hear. Like when they say, you know what your kids did at my house. And I said, no, what? And the lawyer said, well, it was nothing short of a stinking miracle. And those are the words she said. And then she told me, and I called the adoptive mother and I said, tell me what happened last night. And she said, Dana, I just got to thinking that girl, she just needed a mama. She needed a mama. I'm a mama. I'm going to go be a mama to her. And so she went down to the psychiatric ward and asked for permission to see her. They wanted to know, are you the mother? And she said, no, I'm just a friend, never talking about the adoption. And of course, this is pre-COVID, and they could get in. And when they got in, she was in the corner of the room, and she was spitting fire, and she was screaming. And she went over there to her and just embraced her, just hugged her and said, honey, you need a mama, and I'm your mama tonight. And she was biting and kicking and clawing, and boy, Antoinette did not let her go. And she held her all night long. And she washed her face and her hands. She even washed her feet. And she brushed her hair. And she sang to her. And she prayed with her. But she held her tight. And they got on the bed together. And she held her all night long. And she said, I'm your mama. It's okay. It's okay. And just rocked her all night long. Then the morning came. And the girl got up and she said, I think I want to take a shower. And she said, okay. She said, I think I want to get in my clothes. And so they brought down her clothes. And she told Antoinette, I think I'm okay. And she said, are you sure? Because I'll stay with you. Not once did Antoinette say anything about the baby or you've got to get better so you can sign. No, it was truly about this girl. And this girl saw God in Antoinette. I mean, not only saw it, but she felt it. She had a visceral connection to God that whole night long. And I love her for doing that. And I would dare say many of you women, if you had that opportunity, you would do the same. But adoption brings those opportunities that we pray for. And Antoinette didn't shy away from it. The girl signed the papers, and that baby is theirs today. Now, this is just a microcosm of all the different stories. So you can imagine out of 395 stories. And those are just the ones that completed. We've got the other stories where the girls ran off and disappeared, ran off to other countries even. And we worry and we pray about the safety of those girls. One was wanted for murder and for Texas, or attempted murder, I should say. Texas laws allowed her to wait until she had her baby before they put her in jail. She had 2 other children. A family stepped up and said, we'll adopt the baby when born, and the 2 other children had a relationship with this mother. When she went into labor, she used her sister's ID, had the baby, and took off for Mexico. We haven't heard from her. We don't know if she's dead or alive. But those are the ones that will always be in my heart. and they've never left us. But God knows, and God knows what we're doing. But we don't let those situations stop us. We keep moving forward. I feel that, David taught me long ago, you can't help all the children in the world. And I know that, but I also feel in my heart that the ones that get through, that we're able to help, God's got something amazing planned for them. It's like in the Bible where it's like begat, 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 and then there was a David. So maybe not in their lifetime, but in their children's lifetime. And maybe down the road, one of these Sacred Selections families or children are going to connect with my great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, and bring them back to the Lord. This is really paying it forward, people. And they're going to be great warriors against God, and they're going to do great things like David did. I mean, we certainly are going to need some great warriors for God as this world disintegrates into so much evil, aren't we? So this is what we do. I know some people have a preconceived notion about Sacred Selections. I want to say, first off, we are not an adoption agency. That is a business, and that's highly licensed and controlled. That's not. We are not an adoption facilitator, because that, again, is a business. What we are is a 501c3 that helps give grants to Christians to help fund their adoptions. Now, because we do so much work with attorneys, hospitals, doctors, agencies continually, they call us and say, do you have anyone who would want this situation? And then we send that situation that comes from the agency attorney out to our families. And if the families want to be shown, then they let us know. But we're not a business. I want to be really clear on that, because that's not what we do. But we get to play with any agency, anybody in town, because we're not a competitor. So that gives us the advantage. Because of COVID, there have been fewer babies, infants born. Did you know that in 2020 alone, the state of California's birth rate went down 29% that year? 29%. And that's just one state. That it usually has a plus or minus of 0.5%, but 29%. So we were seeing across the board, all adoption agencies, we all started talking with each other. I mean, quite a few went out of business. Like, what's going on? Well, what we found was, this is so interesting, where the girls didn't care about a sexually transmitted disease. They were dying with fear over COVID. I mean, they just knew if they got COVID, they were going to die. So much so that some of the pregnant mothers right now refuse to go to the doctor because they feel like the doctor's office is full of COVID and that will kill them. So until the bars and the parties and all of those things, which is normally where conception happens, because it shows on the intake, where was conception. It's a very interesting form. If you ever get a chance, I would love to share with, if you would want to know, the legalities of what you see on an intake. I can show you a blank form. So until that lifts, this is where we're at. Now, what we are seeing, and in the year of 2021, Sacred Selections has its highest year of helping older children, interestingly enough. The older children are coming to us because their parents or single mothers are just like, I'm out. I can't do this. Maybe they've lost their job. They're losing their housing. All sorts of things come into play, or they're just over their head. The kids have been home. We've had to homeschool. The last sibling group we did was a sibling group of ages 1, 2, and 3. We've done several sibling groups this year, and older children. It's just been a very interesting time of the whole human dynamics when a pandemic, and nobody knew how that would play out. Everybody thought there would be a surplus of babies. There hasn't, but there's been a surplus of older children. and especially special needs children. And I want to address that too. Sacred Selections is very happy to say that we've helped children with just about every special need that you can think of. We've had deaf children, blind children, children with dwarfism, children with half a brain, children with half a heart, children who had Treacher's-Collins syndrome, children with Williams syndrome, children who have are Down syndrome, some who are not able to swallow and eat, but will have a little button and have a feeding tube all of their life. These are the children, the preemies that are born at 1 pound, 1 ounce at 23 weeks. These are the children that the world knows Sacred Selections will scoop up and love. Isn't that great? I mean, really think about it. I mean, it's so wonderful. That's why I say all the time, I'm not this smart. This totally is God, because I'm not this smart. And David's brilliant, but even he's not this smart to put all this together. So we feel like God is bringing all of this together so that we can help the next generation know God. And he's got something amazing planned for them. One little boy that we had helped when he was 6 years old, his parents said, Miss Dana says that God has something amazing plan for you. And he went, ooh, what's the plan? And I said, darling Samuel, I wish I knew that plan too. But we're all working together. I just really appreciate everyone taking time tonight to be here to talk with us. And I'm seeing some comments on the screen. Isla, is there anything that we need to address?
I have seen some wonderful comments, and we've had good viewership. And I don't think we have any at this point that we would add anything to what you have told us about. Okay. And appreciate so much your being with us tonight. And we encourage our viewers that have an interest and would be willing to help Sacred Selections to go to your website, sacredselections.org, to like you on Facebook. I know that Sacred Selections has a Facebook page as well. And then here's a comment. Thank you for all you do. I love my Sacred Selections granddaughters. Michelle Willis. I'm sure that's someone.
I love the grandparents. Being a grandparent myself, I get it. And I know of several families that their first-time grandparents in their 80s, and one was even in her 90s, had a first-time grandparent. And that's so beautiful. Family is wonderful. God instituted the family, and boy, it's extra special with an adopted baby.
That's just wonderful. It just makes me brought a tear to my eye as you were telling the story. And we've had friends that have worked with you, and we know that the trials that there can be, but then the joys and the pleasures. And I love the stories that you told about individuals coming to Christ as a result of adoption. And so it's just wonderful. And thank you again so much for being with us this evening and making this presentation for us. We are really appreciative of your time, and we know it's valuable because we know all the things that you're doing. And we hope that you will receive more maybe I hate to say traffic, we call it on our websites, and that more people will want to help you as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate any opportunity to tell God's story, because this is totally God's story and the children's story. And it's a beautiful story of love. And I just hope that, I was going to mention my co-host here, Sacred Selections, is always with us. And the kids, my grandkids, always say the different teams that everybody loves. And they call me Honey. And Honey's team is Sacred Selections. I go, that's right. It's a great team to be on with lots of hard workers. And we so appreciate anybody who will push our cause out there in front so that people can at least know. And I hope that everybody understands now how Sacred Selections work and just really the why of it, because I think the why of it is so beautiful and because it's so personal to me. that this isn't about money. This is about children.
Right. Wonderful.
And it's about life. You know, I should not be here. There is no reason, because in the
Marvelous.
1950s, Isla, you can attest to this. You did everything the doctor told you to do, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They were
Oh, yeah.
God. They knew best. So
That's right.
so I live. So we have a purpose here.
That's wonderful. Thank you again so much.
You're welcome.
And,
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hope all the ladies, I'll get to see you as we travel around. We're going to Birmingham the 5th of November and Bowling Green the 6th, and then Lindale, Texas on the 13th. And I think that's our end of our fundraising for the year. And then we'll start up again. But I hope if we come to a town near you come and just hear it. It won't be the same story. I promise. We change it up all the time, but that we can meet and hug and just please keep praying for these babies, because the devil fights us every day.
yes. Yes. Well, we encourage our viewers to participate in Sacred Selections in any way that you can.
Thank you.
Next week, Older Women Likewise will have Heather Wells on our program, and she's going to present a lesson. She's entitled The Narrow Way. And Cindy and I will be talking with her and adding comments, and we'll have a conversation with her about the lesson, The Narrow Way. So be sure to tune in next Thursday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time for that program. In the meantime, on Tuesday, Answering Religious Error, it comes on at 8 o'clock, and they are still talking to men, particularly about keeping my head on straight. But of course, it affects women as well. And I know that they have viewers that are men and women who receive much edification from the lessons that they bring. On Wednesdays at noon, they also answer religious questions. It's a pure question and answer. And I think Brian pulls in a religious meme every once in a while that they discuss. And it's an enjoyable and I hate to say entertaining. It certainly is edifying, but they do it in such a way that it really keeps your attention. And so we encourage you to watch both of those programs. And we want to thank Dana again for being with us on the program. And we just wish you all the best. And so
Thank you so much. And you too.
thank you. And good night to all.
Okay. Good night.